Throughout the history of the Church, various forms of religious life have emerged, some remaining faithful to the spirit and apostolic tradition, while others straying from the pure teaching of the gospel. A striking example of this contrast is the profound difference between the Templar Knights, a military religious order that arose in the medieval West, and Orthodox monks, whose lives are rooted in asceticism, spiritual struggle, and non-involvement in worldly conflicts. These two archetypes reflect not only differences in historical context, but also embody two opposing theologies regarding the role of the Christian in the world and the relationship between the Church and worldly power. The Order of the Templar Knights was founded in 1119 in the context of the Crusades by Hugh de Pin and other French knights with the blessing of the Pope of Rome. Members of the order took monastic vows, chastity, poverty, and obedience, yet at the same time they were soldiers who bore arms, participated in wars, and declared their purpose to defend the pilgrims and the holy places in the Holy Land. This combination of monastic life and military activity is uncanonical and incompatible with the tradition and canons of the Orthodox Church. The Holy Apostle Paul clearly states that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil. And Christ the Lord told his disciples, "Those who take up the sword will perish by the sword." The Orthodox Church strictly forbids clerics and monastics from engaging in violence or military activity. Apostolic Canon 83 clearly states that any member of the clergy who becomes a soldier and chooses to bear arms must be deposed from office. Similarly, Canon 7 of the Fourth Ecumenical Council from Chalcedon in 451 instructs that monks must remain under the authority of the bishop and refrain from involvement in public or political matters. This stance is reinforced by Canon 66 of the Trullo Council from 692, which declares that a monk who dares to carry weapons or kills someone, even by accident, must be excommunicated. The severity of such actions is further emphasized in Canon 22 of Saint Nicephorus the Confessor, which holds that a monk who kills, even in legitimate self-defense, can no longer be accepted into monastic life. Likewise, Saint Basil the Great, in Canon 55, teaches that even a killing committed out of necessity requires repentance, as it is not without guilt. The canons do not make the modern legal distinctions between premeditated murder, involuntary manslaughter, or legitimate self-defense. Any form of killing is viewed from a spiritual perspective as a grave sin that requires deep repentance and withdrawal from active ministry. If a monk kills someone while defending another person or the monastery, even if the intention is noble, the act remains a serious transgression. He is not automatically excommunicated, but may be deposed from monastic rank or placed under strict penance, a long period of repentance. He is forbidden from serving liturgically, but may be received into the community as a simple brother in repentance. There are examples in Orthodox Church history where monasteries were attacked, for example during the Ottoman or Arab invasions, and some monks took up arms in defense. In such cases, the discernment of the local bishop or the Holy Synod determines the application of economia or pastoral leniency depending on the context. Although the Templars wore the monastic habit and invoked the name of Christ, they lived in disobedience to the commandments of the Gospel and the canons of the Church. They turned monastic life into a military ideology, which represents a serious distortion of Christian asceticism. In stark contrast, Orthodox monks follow a path of total renunciation of the world and of their own will. A monk is one who dedicates his life to prayer, fasting, obedience, and repentance, seeking to purify his heart in order to receive Christ. Saint Anthony the Great, the father of monasticism, says, "A monk is one who flees the world and withdraws into the desert to struggle with himself, not with bodily enemies." Likewise, Saint Basil the Great, in his monastic rules, strictly forbids monks from taking part in worldly battles, stating, "He who has left the world has nothing to do with the wars of men. His struggle is of another kind, against the passions and the unclean spirits." The Templar order was created within the Roman Catholic Church, an ecclesial structure that had separated from the Orthodox Church following the Great Schism of 1054. This schism was not merely administrative, but dogmatic and canonical, caused by serious theological deviations in the West. The introduction of the filioque, papal centralization, the use of unleavened bread in the Eucharist, and other liturgical and canonical innovations. After the schism, the Western Church developed a different theology, one that tolerated and even encouraged the blending of the Church with politics and warfare. The Crusades and military religious orders, such as the Templars, are expressions of this distorted theology, which is incompatible with apostolic tradition and the spirit of orthodoxy. For this reason, the Templars were not part of the one holy, Catholic, in the patristic sense, and apostolic church, but rather represented an expression of a church wounded by heresy and innovation. Therefore, although the Templar Knights outwardly wore a religious habit, they were representatives of an ideology foreign to the spirit of the gospel and the patristic teaching. Their contradictory way of life, caught between the cross and the sword, cannot be regarded as a genuine form of Christian service, but rather as a distortion of the gospel calling made possible by an ecclesial structure severed from apostolic tradition. In contrast, Orthodox monks remain true witnesses of the peace of Christ, of the purity of heart, and of the unseen spiritual struggle. Through their silence, their prayer, and their obedience to the Church, they preserve the living spirit of orthodoxy, far from any unlawful union between faith and the sword.